From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello. Welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Paul, Mission Control Decant. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this stuff they don't want you to know. This is part 2 of our dive into Davos and the Great Reset. If you haven't listened to part 1, by all means, you can still listen to this first, but it'll make a lot more sense if you go back to Wednesday's episode and see the background that we laid out. And I think that we did an okay job outlining some of the basics of this initiative and organization, and then I think we did an okay job giving the background here, because as we said in part 1, even the here are the facts part was crazy. Like, there's crazy stuff.
Yeah, there was a whole section where I was like, oh, we haven't even gotten crazy yet, and it's already crazy. We got pre-crazy. But I do believe that this part 2 picks up where it really starts to pop off.
That's correct.
So here's a quick recap previously on stuff they don't want you to know.
Here are the facts.
The World Economic Forum, or Davos. It's a great place for great big ideas, where the public sphere and private sphere can come together and work in harmony for the greater good.
And our compatriot, Paul Mission Control Decant, said something very interesting off air. Paul, you said, so Davos is kind of like South by Southwest on steroids. And it's true. One thing we didn't talk about was the abundance of wild after-hours parties. Like the guy who's in charge of Salesforce flew out fresh flower lei from Hawaii for all the attendees of his party. He also flew out a live, well, I guess all human bands are live bands, but he flew out a band that survived and performed.
Was it like a steel drum band of some variety?
I think more traditional Hawaiian music, but I'm not sure because, like many people in the audience today, I did not attend the 2020 Davos.
I had the odd, I guess, honor or whatever of attending a similar type of event that is clearly influenced by Davos, since this is like sort of the granddaddy of these type of events, and it's called Summit, and it takes place in Los Angeles, and the guy that started it literally owns a mountain in like Colorado. Can't remember his name, but it's this, really, I was there as press. I was like working on a podcast and was going to like record an interview with like the founder of Cirque du Soleil, but like it didn't pan out, but I had a pass to go. And so I saw some of the panels, and this is the kind of place where you see stuff like this only at these kind of things. I saw Jaden Smith interview Al Gore about climate change in this weird old theater in downtown LA. And then I saw I really enjoyed this. It was this, interesting kind of mindfulness guru named Eckhart Tolle, who is like a, he's kind of this like meditative kind of mindfulness, guy who is obviously beloved by a lot of these high powered people who brought him in, and he does speaking engagements, but was very, very adaptable. And I'm glad I got to go, but just being there and seeing the opulence and the types of people that actually paid for their badges was definitely a bit of a culture shock for me.
Yeah, I've been invited to things like that in a similar vein. Probably one of my favorite things to go to, even though I know they're not perfect, are TED Talks and TEDx stuff. It's always inspiring, even if there are things there that I don't agree with. I love the conversations. I don't ever regret skipping out on those things. For a while, I did try to skip out on a lot of them. But my one big regret is missing any of the speeches about Corvid intelligence for, obvious reasons, right? The science is amazing. God,
yeah. I know, man. I'm sorry. I feel you.
You just need a fleet of Corvids. Is that what you'd call it? Well, I mean, it'd be a murder, technically, which honestly seems unfairly sinister, even though I know it kind of tracks with my view of birds. But for you, Ben, I don't think a murder seems right. I like a fleet.
Murder of crows, Check this out if you haven't heard this one, folks. An unkindness of ravens.
Also,
Love
incredibly unpleasant connotations there.
So emo.
Hey, do you guys remember when I went to the Bilderberg meeting in 2011? Do you guys remember that?
I remember when you went to the Build-A-Bear conference.
Yeah, nope, that was it. You're right, that was it.
Well, they have a lot in common. You know, I think they're the subsidiaries of the same organization, right?
Clearly.
I have too much time outside.
Oh, we're keeping it in. We're keeping it in. We have Matt's son, by far the best part of the show, live in effect. Is he going to make some remarks?
Nope, it was really important stuff. He needed the PlayStation 4 controller because he has things to do, important stuff.
What's he gaming on these days?
Rayman, right?
Nope. This time he's going for Cuphead, which
that game is punishingly difficult.
It's incredibly difficult.
like father, like son.
Is
Can he move things with his mind yet?
Yeah.
Shh. Anyway, so
moving on. Moving on. Yes. So all of us have experienced things that are kind of at a lower level of this sort of event, but not near as exclusive as this. Here's where it gets crazy. The theme of last year's meeting at Davos, the Great Reset Initiative, was to use chaos in a little finger way, to treat chaos as a ladder, as a window of opportunity, to say that when whatever secular God or series of circumstances you believe in closes a door, that force inevitably opens a window through which you may crawl into a new world. They wanted to use the chaos of the COVID-19 pandemic as an opportunity to rebuild society and the global economy at large in a more sustainable way. Prince Charles, yes, that Prince Charles, who may have recently asked about his relative's future skin tone, kicked off Davos with a speech at the launch ceremony that described key focus areas that were built on an earlier initiative that he had, a pre-existing idea. So he wasn't just like up there freestyling, here are the things I think are important, which also would have been cool, especially if his freestyle rhymed, but not there yet. Maybe 2022. Here's what he wanted to fix: the reinvigoration of science, technology, and innovation, a move toward net zero transitions globally, the introduction of carbon pricing, reinventing long-standing incentive structures, rebalancing investments to include more green investments, and encouraging green public infrastructure projects. So using financial tools that already exist or that have been proposed to maybe not so much push the world at large toward more alternative energy or to less waste, but to incentivize it. It's very different. To make it, to alter the rules of the playing field such that it is more profitable in the long term to engage in these new technologies, these green technologies, and so on. And yes, we are well aware of a concept called greenwashing, which is when an organization, be it a company or a country, purports to do things along this level, but really it's kind of lip service. This stuff does seem sincere. There is solid science that says these things can help the world. But again, nobody agrees on how they should be rolled out, who pays the tab, and who gets the immediate benefits. So, of course, you've got, imagine you've got this elite meeting of some of the world's most important people. The city is locked down. You can't go. The journalists who do report there tell stories of extensive security, of metal detectors, of literal snipers posted on buildings, because there are forces that would be antagonistic to a lot of the A-listers here. So obviously, and Prince Charles kicks off the speech. Obviously, conspiracy theories emerge very quickly in full force, and they already existed for decades regarding this organization and other places like the World Economic Forum. But this time it was different because of COVID and because of some other conspiracies that existed before the Davos meeting or shortly, or coalesced shortly thereafter, including 5G, including the idea of microchipping and so on. Some of these conspiracies here in the West, in the U.S. in particular, were spread by what have been described as far-right groups. So it's like there is a Great Reset conspiracy that I have a terrible analogy for, and I hope it's not too cringeworthy. But please, of course, as always, forward any complaints to our complaint department, Jonathan Strickland at iHeartRadio.com. If you're on like a QAnon forum or something, you would probably see this, and it would be something that a lot of people would agree with. This theory called the Great Reset has the somewhat dubious honor of becoming the first widely circulated conspiracy theory of the Biden administration. Yeah,
and it's a bit strange. You'll see a lot written about this on social media and forums. And in this theory, we've kind of described to you how the wide view of the Davos man is different from maybe the people who actually go there, and how there are misconceptions about some, of the ongoings there, but how also there's just not a lot of transparency about what goes on in after hours, stuff that's not officially posted on the Davos site or posted on social media there. But in this theory, it describes those who attend and those who run the whole thing there at Davos as essentially a coven of technocratic witches, really. Doing in some ways telling the future and casting spells to affect the future.
Yeah, exactly. Techno-financial oligarchs or occultists. Current President Biden had a slogan called Build Back Better. And this was red meat to folks who believe in some of these theories. They said that Build Back Better is actually a cover phrase. It's a euphemism for a plan to enslave humanity and end capitalism, to abolish private property, to imprison everybody who dissents in any way, meaning particularly that if you refuse to accept the implant of a thought-reading microchip, off to the gulag with you. And this is interesting to me because if you look at the structure of this, maybe there's a little meta, but this conspiracy is kind of like if you go to Chipotle and someone's building a burrito for you, you can take the base theory here, globalism, one world governance, and that's kind of like your tortilla. And then you can add some other conspiratorial toppings as the mood strikes you.
Ben, where do I go to invest in thought-reading microchip technology?
Noel just wants the hot investment.
True. Yeah, it's weird because you would think that if the science were that far along, there would be a lot of things to invest in. But medtech is medtech, biotech, whatever you want to call it, is a huge market. This is not financial advice, as they say on Wall Street Bets. But from what I understand, Noel, all you have to do is call up Billy G. Just text Bill Gates.
Billy G. Williams? No, that's Billy D. Williams. Sorry. Yeah, got it. BG.
What's Billy D doing too?
Yeah, he was in The Mandalorian for a hot minute, wasn't he? No, he was in the most recent Star Wars big screen reboot. Would love to see him in The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I'd love to, see him on the show. It's been a while since we caught up, and I do wonder what he would have to say about this. So if we're back in our conspiratorial Chipotle, here are the options you can get as toppings. Banning religion. It's a good old standby. It always stands the test of time and comes back up here in the U.S. Some small version of are the powers that be banning religion pops up right before Christmas, right? They're making a war on Christmas because of the way they're writing things or saying happy holidays. Another ingredient you could add would be crushing all small business. This means that any private entity that's not affiliated with the big Davos players will be driven to insolvency or acquired by the in-group of global corporations.
Another thing here is something very common and something we've been watching occur for a long time, which is replacing workforces of humanity, human workforces, the bees, the drones that do everything, With automation, with technology, with self-checkout lanes. Sorry, that ship has sailed.
I love self-checkout lanes. I don't know if that makes me a bad person, but I am all about it.
I hate them.
You hate them?
I want to talk to somebody.
Oh, man.
Matt, are you lonely? You talk to us every day, bud.
I just mean that one-on-one, even if we're masked up and stuff. Just whatever.
I also, it's a nice touch to have someone, bag your groceries who has experience bagging groceries, because I'm very bad at it. I smush my bread every time.
Yeah, there's a Tetris to it, right?
But this goes further, by the way, because it's not just replacing, the workforce in that way. It's in some way altering the humans in order to make them either unable to work in that way or just unnecessary in some form or fashion.
Yeah, forced cybernetics, forced wetware kind of stuff. And then also, going back to our earlier chapter 1 episode, imagine, you see somebody who doesn't hit Dunbar's number for you, and you're just like, that is not really a person to me. That's the function. That's the thing that moves the garbage on Tuesday. Then psychologically, you are not particularly affected by a change in the thing that is doing that function for you. So that's where that conspiracy comes from. And then there's this other, and I guess this would be more right-wing idea, that this will result in a forced redistribution of wealth, but not for the high-level players at Davos. Instead, it'll be forced redistribution of wealth for, the average middle-class household, the average lower working class household, that they're out to take your stuff. And when you hear pundits or critics talking about the Great Reset conspiracies, they're generally talking about some combination of these ideas we just mentioned. Lots of different possible flavor combinations. You know what I mean? You can add all sorts of stuff. And then, of course, the avocado of anti-Semitism pops up, right, in this Chipotle, because it often does, sadly, still, when we're talking about globalist conspiracies. But no matter what you add to the tortilla here, it is still a burrito. It's still kind of the same thing. And if there is an employee of the month, I promise I'm about to let this analogy go. Thank you guys for humoring me. In this conspiratorial Chipotle, it would probably be, at least here in the U.S., a guy named Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano.
That's right. And he actually wrote an open letter to Donald Trump that was later promoted on the Fox TV network. And this was in October of 2020. In this letter, Vigano, there's a little accent over though. Maybe it's a no. Who knows? He alleged that the Great Reset was in fact a cover for a scheme built by none other than Billy G himself, Bill Gates, centered on the, quote, renunciation of private property and adherence to a program of vaccination against COVID-19. Probably some of where the idea of microchip implants being part of the vaccination process maybe came from, right? But Vigano claimed people who refused a global digital ID from a, quote, health dictatorship would be imprisoned in detention camps and lose all of their possessions. So yeah, I mean, folks, you well may recognize this, having a lot in common of this idea of Agenda 21. Just a bit more vaccination centric, right? And Ben, could we do a quick refresher on Agenda 21?
Yeah, so it's a program for sustainable development that comes to us from the United Nations. But the conspiracy, of course, is that it is a further step toward one world government, that it would create not just a global government, but a global military and then a global currency.
Right. And of course, all of the neo-Nazis and anti-Semites out there did their best to pin this on, ding, 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 Jewish people, with, absolutely zero evidence to back that up. And then you've got the most outlandish, far out idea of them all, the idea that Grover and Elmo, that's right, of Sesame Street puppet fame, are part of this scheme. Or a scheme. Breitbart columnist James Dellingpole argued that a WEF podcast called The Great Reset, Resetting Education with Sesame Street is propaganda meant to brainwash children, along with videos demonstrating how to wear a mask and to practice social distancing. Things that, as we know, were very much demonized and politicized by folks in this set. So
you can find this podcast that we're mentioning here, The Great Reset, Resetting Education with Sesame Street. You can find it on SoundCloud, and you can find it in a couple other places. If you go to SoundCloud, you can read some of the comments that are placed within that file, because, when you're playing a SoundCloud file, you can comment at a specific section and it shows up. I'm going to read a couple of these really quickly, and I will edit myself. Alexander says, "Death to the New World Order. Jesus is Lord." Another one says, "Resetting the entire world is a very big job." Dangerously Close says, "Go f*** yourselves. The people will rise against you. You better hide."
Are they talking directly to Elmo and Grover, or
I
just
don't know?
I greatly appreciate this stuff because it's funny. It's public education if it's something you agree with, but it's propaganda if it's something with which you disagree. And I think all of us, I think all people who were watching Sesame Street at some point had one or two characters you didn't trust. You know what I mean? Like Big Bird always seemed a little sus to me.
Really? He was always I thought he was the voice of reason. Elmo always rubbed me the wrong way. That weird little yappy voice, and he just seemed like a speed freak or something. I don't know what his deal is.
I'm sorry, I don't have a nemesis.
What about Snuffleupagus?
Snuffleupagus.
How come only Big Bird can see him?
Well, he's special that way,
What about the Count?
The Count is my dude.
You like the Count?
I like his vibe.
Yeah, man.
He's very, what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
They never really go into like the mythology of the Count. Like, is he a proper vampire? Does he feed on numbers? Like that?
I don't know. And I always wondered why he counts in threes. Whenever they're doing number of the day, he always counts up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
rhythm,
8.
He's all about the rhythm and the cadence. Right. I thought you meant he only counts in threes, like 1, 3, 9. That's not, because he teaches you how to count by twos. He's all about all the different ways of counting because he's the Count.
Mm-hmm. And then, I think for many people growing up, and especially in these current troubled times, Oscar the Grouch is kind of a spirit animal. Like a lot of people get, he's got a cool hand Luke energy of existential, of ennui about him. Shout out to Illumination Global Unlimited. And speaking of sponsors, what say we pause to hear a little bit from them and return with even more controversy, conspiracy, and criticism of the Great Reset.
Okay, and we're back. Now, we just talked about a lot of the claims against Davos and the World Economic Forum, and they seem to be pretty out there, some of them, if you're really thinking about them pretty hard. But we do know that we've already discussed the real mundane criticisms that exist of this group.
Yeah, right. Which is just the idea that this is an absolutely elite closed door session where real decisions are potentially being made, whether you can call them handed down or just influencing people with massive amounts of economic and political power. I mean, you can't really say this is depriving us of democracy in terms of like the way Congress works and the way laws are passed, but there's a lot of closed door stuff that goes on behind that stuff that we don't see. So this is almost like an extra level of closed dooredness behind an already pretty obscure process that we are not always in on.
That's right. And we mentioned before, at least we briefly mentioned the whole Green New Deal kind of thing, moving to more sustainable energy, different forms of energy. And it is a real threat for corporations and individuals who make their money off of the older energy gathering techniques, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that we know that's a real threat to some people, but we also know that is a potential planet saving thing, potentially, if you believe it. And I believe it.
Yeah, I mean, what good is it? One way to look at this is to ask yourself honestly. We have to ask ourselves, what good is it to have a very successful corporation when there's not a planet for it to operate on? You know, and that sounds hyperbolic, but it's unfortunately it's in the cards of a very large and terrifying deck called the future. We have to point out, you know, first off, neither the domestic political left or the domestic political right are 100% on board with the stated aims of Davos. And often you'll see various groups say that these aims or these goals do not feel sincere. The domestic right will sometimes argue this is a cover for the imposition of communism and the dismantling of what they see as traditional society. And the domestic left is pretty skeptical that these global emperors of capitalism are either going to be A, truly capable, or B, truly willing to address problems that they have, to a great degree or to some degree, created, especially when they continue to benefit, to one degree or another, from that system. Why would I logically destroy or endanger the thing that continues to ensure my financial existence, right? It's a good question. But then there's that perspective. We keep going back to it. Who is Davos really helping? Beyond the theory, in practice, who is this helping? Is it helping the environment? Is it helping the crushing mass of people struggling amid poverty? Or is it, as some critics allege, more a matter of helping the world's wealthy feel a little bit better about all the power that they possess? And this is something that I didn't really think about, but it does bear exploration.
I think it does, and it's something we have to take into account, because we talk about motivation on this show all the time, and you wonder what each individual what motivates each individual person, right? And when you look at some of the criticism that continues to come out, then you start to get a picture of at least how some people are thinking about it. And let's jump to Forbes, a man named John Maldin over there, who has a summation of this big problem. He calls Davos, quote, another example of wealthy power elites salving their consciences with faux efforts to help the masses, and in the process make themselves even wealthier and more powerful. Yikes, man. I would say that's a very that's a bleak way to look at it, yeah. But
is it cynical though, or is it like realistic? You know, I mean, I don't know. Maybe those things can work hand in hand. But like, I saw a thing pop up on a Facebook story the other day, or an Instagram story rather, the other day, where it was just talking about like the poverty industry. With like things like check cashing companies, overdraft fees, payday loans or whatever, you know what I mean? Like all of this stuff, these are billion-dollar industries. And not to say that any of this is discussed at Davos, I mean, because it's all kind of behind this, you could call it a guise, I guess, of like making everyone's lives better. But the question is like, who is everyone? And are these just kind of like virtue signaling attempts to like, help third world countries and help like the quote unquote like global poor, rather than like, the poor right here in our country that are largely suffering under this kind of system of economic oppression, in my opinion.
It's expensive to be poor. And I wish more people would talk about that more often. You know what I mean? The associated cost of living toward the bottom of any socioeconomic system can be tremendously difficult. It is in a very real way, kind of playing life on hard mode in many aspects. And it is a good question. Who is everyone, right? Who counts as a person here, and to what degree? Before we continue with this, I do want to say it is important, everyone, to know that when you're talking about an organization of this size, you are very rarely going to be talking about a uniform mass of opinions. The Davos and the World Economic Forum are rife with people who are sincerely making their best good faith efforts to improve the world while we still have something around to improve. But maybe not everybody. And maybe even those good faith efforts are at times misplaced. That's what a lot of the journalists criticizing this and a lot of the experts and the researchers criticizing this are saying. I was surprised that Forbes was dunking on them so hard. You haven't seen the rest of it yet, folks, but we'll get there. To put it in perspective, so there are a lot of talks, right? But there are also a lot of attractions and a lot of after parties. One of the most popular attractions in Davos is a reenactment of where you experience, to a degree, the life of a refugee on the run. Attendees crawl on their hands and knees, pretending to escape gunfire. It is year over year one of the most popular attractions.
I totally see that, and that sounds, I don't know, maybe an effort to change your perspective a little bit, but it does sound performative. I guess what I'm feeling right now and thinking about all of this stuff and then hearing the criticism of it and then even examining my own inner criticisms of it and my skepticism that there's anything actually good being done here. I've got this competing thing where even going to Davos in an attempt to discuss some of these big problems and seek solutions, even if it is super flawed, feels like that individual person is doing way more than I personally to push forward humanity to the future, right? Or in an attempt. So I'm just having a problem like viewing it as this big negative thing, but I agree with a lot of the criticism put forward too. So I think there's a push-pull that I'm experiencing right here, and I wonder if anybody else listening is having that.
Right. Like, is it, I think we're there with you. Is it in absolute terms, right, in total terms, then these individuals can do much, much more than the average person, right, through any number of avenues. But also the question is that I'd like everybody to ask ourselves is, what do you have in common with the people at Davos? Because, not all countries have equal quality of life. So there are some countries where someone who would be considered very poor in comparison to their neighbors is living an amazing life, or what people in other countries or other parts of the world would consider an amazing life, So it's a question we have to turn on ourselves too. Like, what have I done? What am I doing? What will I do? And I think it's an appropriate and sincere question to ask. And for the work that's being done at Davos, I think there's a lot of it that's worthy of applause. But this is about the dark side and the problems. So the third point of criticism here, I want to go back to that phrase mentioned earlier: stakeholder capitalism. Boy, that sounds so good, right? We're stakeholders. We're all stakeholders now. You're a CEO. I am a farmer. And here's the person that repairs the tractor. And here's the person that takes out the garbage on Tuesday. All of us are equal in that we are stakeholders in this new form of capitalism. It's a slick phrase, but dangerously vague.
Yeah, because, there's no parity, right, between these different stakeholders at all. There are the stakeholders at the top who, you could probably change a few letters and call them stockholders. And then you've got like your, lower tier workers who absolutely keep the trains running on time and keep the manufacturing process running correctly or whatever. But they're not on an equal footing as the folks at the top. No way. So you're right. It's sort of like a feel-goodery kind of way of referring to these things that implies we're all in this together, except, not really.
Mm-hmm. My assistant told me not everybody goes to college.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that, folks. Think about it.
All right, guys. I love what we're doing here. I learn a lot better when we're working in analogies. Is there any chance we could jump back to Chipotle, Ben?
Sure. Yeah. Let's go. What do you got? What's on the menu?
Oh, I don't know. I'm going to you, man.
How about a quesadilla?
I just know those chips are on point.
They're salty, though, man. They're a little too salty. Can we do a quesadilla analogy this time?
Yeah, sure.
I know it's not their like go-to menu item, but they'll do one for you.
They'll do it. Yeah, you just have to exercise. You just have to have good charisma stats. You have to. It's an off menu, so you
got to roll at least a 6 to get them to make you a quesadilla.
Yeah, quesadilla by far one of my favorite foods, unrecognized. God, I'm going to make one right after this. Okay, so if we're going back with our Chipotle analogy, then we would say to Professor Schwab, if he is ordering a burrito, a quesadilla, if he's ordering a quesadilla and that quesadilla is stakeholder capitalism, then he's not really being helpful to the people who are supposed to, create this quesadilla, because they say, okay, they got the tortilla, right, of globalism. And then they say, well, what is stakeholder capitalism? What goes in this quesadilla, Professor? And then the professor,
about steak?
Well, the professor goes, what really goes into this quesadilla is the idea of responsibility and accountability. And they're like, we don't have that kind of cheese.
Schwab, are you talking about corporate personhood?
Right. That's right. As this become a weird off menu item, there's a guy named Ben Sixsmith, which has a great name for any fans of Cloud Atlas, especially. He argues that this is not a bug, that this is a feature. It is vague by design, because then it allows these gigantic companies to kind of interpret what stakeholder capitalism is as they wish. And this leads us to ask ourselves, is this really a new, innovative attempt at something different, this quesadilla? Or is it really just kind of a burrito that we rolled differently to look like it was a new menu item when it's the same stuff with the same ingredients?
You just flattened it.
You just flattened it. You just flattened it to make it look different at the time. So there's an author named Naomi Klein who was writing for The Intercept, and she claims the Great Reset is just this. She calls it a COVID-branded reiteration of all the stuff Davos already does. She says, quote, in short, the Great Reset encompasses some good stuff that won't happen and some bad stuff that certainly will, and, frankly, nothing out of the ordinary in our era of green billionaires readying rockets for Mars.
Oh, man.
Oh, she continues. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but so basically all the bad stuff's going to happen anyway. These are lovely ideas. They're never going to happen. And everybody that can is getting the hell out of here.
Yeah. She goes further, too, because she says, furthermore, the WEF has historically been against a lot of the solutions, or a lot of the things, rather, that could have the potential to address or solve the issues it claims to champion. It's like, well, why aren't they bigger fans of more robust regulation or protection for local industries, progressive taxation? And I think she prefaces this with like, and God forbid, nationalization, which is, a hugely hot topic in oil wars of years gone by. And she calls it she coined a phrase that I think we'll all enjoy called shock doctrine.
Yeah. I'm always a fan of smashing things together a little more close. So let's go with shocktrine. No, it's too obvious. I like shock doctrine. It's fun to say, which is an attempt by the elite to leverage things like COVID-19 or, catastrophic weather, infrastructure collapse and all of that as a way of kind of ramming through these policies that, quote, further enrich the already wealthy and restrict democratic liberties.
Interesting.
And that's according to Klein.
Reminds me a bit of the Patriot Act, guys.
Yeah, and she goes on to point out, Ben, what I believe is your very favorite headline of this entire article, probably because it's food-based, but she titled her article, The Great Reset Conspiracy Smoothie. To keep in line with all of these food metaphors. She went with smoothies. We went with Chipotle, but I respect the craft. I respect the work. For sure. And whether or not, you personally are a fan of capitalism writ large, capital C capitalism, or whether you are of the echelon of society that would attend Davos, it's pretty clear that the idea of philanthropy, and we've talked about this in the past, there's an episode in particular, I think it's called The Dark Side of Philanthropy or something along those lines. It can have just that, a dark side. And Ben, you came up with a great term for this. We've already talked about greenwashing. So what would be a term to describe the kind of optics of benevolence that all of this stuff kind of has?
Oh boy. Okay. Still workshopping this one. So everybody go easy on me. Good washing. Good washing. What is good washing? Maybe the mic drop moment comes from Steve Dunning, also at Forbes. I'm still kind of surprised they wrote about Davos this way. Dunning says firms can go on privately shoveling money to their shareholders and executives while maintaining a public front of exquisite social sensitivity and exemplary altruism. And then Sixsmith comes in, like dropping a cameo in the verse there, and says, Amazon can proclaim that Black Lives Matter, for example, while its employees piss in bottles for fear of being fired for taking toilet breaks.
That's the mic drop moment right there.
Right. But it's good washing, isn't it? Look what we are doing for society, just not for our employees.
Speaking of piss breaks, guys, I'm going to need to do that really quickly, but we will be right back with a word from our sponsor.
And we're back. So this is maybe the most important part. How much sand do these conspiracies and these criticisms actually hold? I think we can all agree that if this is a vast communist conspiracy to turn all the governments of the world, democratic, authoritarian, what have you, into one big communist government,
or socialist at the very least, right?
Or socialist at the very least. Yeah, good point. They're two different things, but they, trending in the same direction. Well, if that were the case, the only thing we can say for sure is this would be one hell of a plot twist for Professor Schwab and pretty much all the companies that are participating in Davos. I mean, think about that. Like Apple, Pfizer, Lockheed. Are they really known for their radical left-wing ideologies? Is it like Pfizer down with the neoliberals or something? I don't really think so.
Not so much.
They're still getting paid for vaccines, remember. They're making money.
That's a good point, Ben. And it's the pandemic that really kind of brings all of this into focus because every single country, every one of these companies is in a pretty difficult position in that if you move too far along in a solution kind of in your own wheelhouse, you've got no way of making these other organizations do the same, meaning that there has to be some level of cooperation for the system to hold, for everything to kind of hold together. If you're out completely in left field or right field or whichever direction of field you find yourself in, you're not going to be as successful than if these big businesses were working in concert, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And think about it. If you're a big business and you have competitors in the market and you say, I'm going to make these radical changes on my home turf and nobody else does, then your stuff might get more and more expensive. It might be more and more difficult to run your day-to-day business. You might end up being bankrupt because you were not able to move as a unit with these larger industry players. I mean, it's a thing that we can't miss, regardless of how you feel about Davos or globalism. Professor Schwab, not for nothing, he's right. Capitalism, as it stands today, has these massive, dangerous, possibly fatal structural problems. And these problems really are too big to tackle through conventional means. The stuff that worked in the past, it's probably not going to work now. And that brings us to a weird spot, right? Because the erosion of the short-lived age of privacy is very real. Right? We are in a surveillance state, and we have been. The long-term prospects of life for this species, spoiler alert, not looking particularly swell at the moment. And unfortunately, we don't need some wild, easily disproven story about Bill Gates and COVID microchips to come to either of those conclusions. They are inarguable and they are fact. And stepping down off the what do you call it, soapbox here. I was wondering, do people really used to stand on soapboxes?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And even like on film sets, they use apple boxes. That's they still call them that anyway, where they're basically just like expensive, hollow pieces of like wooden frame to make shorter actors look taller.
I just want to say, guys, before we finish up here, you guys know this, and I've mentioned this before in a couple shows. I personally lost my religious faith a long time ago. And when I lost it, I put that faith, that need to believe in something, it was still existed. I put it in groups of intelligent people getting together and trying to solve problems. And that's really where I put my faith. Like, okay, if this isn't going to help me, my belief now is this religion isn't going to help me. At least humanity is going to help me and, all of us get through these things. So this episode has been really difficult personally for me to square some of it, because I agree with the realities that we've outlined here with the problems, the criticisms. I agree with that stuff. It's just tough thinking that our best option is so flawed.
Secular humanism. That's
what I should call it. I just, it's tough knowing that the elite secular humanism movement is...
Yeah, but they're called the elite because they're a small percentage, of humanity. And sure, they have a lot of control over the course of humanity, but they are not humanity. And I would argue that in general, I've seen a lot of outpouring of wonderful qualities of humanity during this pandemic, of being there for your fellow human and just kind of like having each other's backs and all of that stuff. And now I'm kumbayaing a little bit, but I have not lost faith in humanity at large. But yeah, it's a bummer when so few very, very, very powerful stakeholders kind of set the course, for so many others.
I mean, it's all beautiful, Noel, and I agree with you. It's just how do we solve the water crisis problem, right? I mean, there's just...
Well,
I don't know.
We can leave that conversation for another day. But in the meantime, before we wrap, I think we have a little bit of a special surprise, don't we?
Oh, hey guys, this is Alex Jones speaking. Big fan of the show, big fan. Just want to let you know that you guys are my favorite sorts of fake news. Yeah, sorry about that. I just snorted a big rail of Coke. Shit puts in air in your chest, tell you what. Anyways, I just listened to your episode on the Nestle water conspiracy, and I thought, geez, what a great idea to let you and your listeners get on a great opportunity. It's just a great opportunity. I'm proud to announce the InfoWars brand of bottled water. I know. You guys are thinking, Alex, how did you get past the globalists that run Nestle and get your own bottled water line? Well, the globalists they cashed on me, and by the globalists, I definitely don't mean the Jews. Just to make that clear. Anyways, this water, it's great. It's great. It's totally gluten free. It's only got a little bit of mercury in it. But totally, like I said, it's good stuff. It's less mercury than probably less mercury. Well, I mean, it's probably got less mercury than Flint, Michigan, but it's good for you. It builds character. Anyways, I just want to let you guys in on that. You can get a super good deal on alex-jones.bs. And also, Ben, you are my spirit animal. I'm serious about that. You are my spirit animal. Thank you.
Well. That was something.
What do you think? Have we made it?
I mean, you're fake Alex Jones's spirit animal, Ben. That's pretty exciting.
Hey, we can't confirm if that was fake Alex Jones or the real thing.
I don't think real Alex Jones would narrate himself doing a giant rail of Coke. I think he would just do it and let you decide for yourself.
You're saying you guys heard that too? I thought that was just in my head. Okay. All right.
Well,
I don't know.
Something.
I didn't go to the website. He did maybe try to sell us bottled water. At the very least, it's a very good impression. Someone was channeling Alex Jones, maybe, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Somebody printed out one of those Alex Jones sigils and
now that he's been pulled from all the popular platforms, I guess the only place you can really get him is out in the ether, just doing channeling him, just from the zeitgeist at large. Where is he on now? What is he? He's on like Parler or something. That Gab? I think Gab is where he. I don't remember.
I have no idea. Maybe he's just lonely and calling us. But if you want to take a page from Alex Jones's book, you can contact us directly. We try to be easy to find online.
Yep, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, where we are Conspiracy Stuff, or Conspiracy Stuff Show on Instagram. You can also join our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy. A lot of fun to be had there.
Yeah, that's right. You can also give us a call. Our number is 1-833-STDWYTK. Please leave your name, whatever you want us to call you. Doesn't have to be your real name. Mm-hmm. Tell us your message. Try and keep it succinct if you can, a little short.
Yeah, like Alex, his message was blissfully short. Still felt a little long, but it, clock time wise, it was like only about a minute 30, and that's 1-833-STDWYTK.
Yes, and if there is a special message you just want to leave for us, you don't want to share with the internet, that's fine too. Just tell us at the end. Most importantly, do not feel as though you need to censor yourself. That is antithetical to a lot of to this show. Like, we could totally do cursing, by the way, folks. We just think it's way funnier when we bleep things. So do feel free, if you have a story that wouldn't fit in 3 minutes, those 3 minutes are yours, then just write to us. Send us a direct email. Make it as long as you want. We read every one. You can send it to us 24/7. We are
Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com. Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.